Hello everybody and welcome back to another Django and React tutorial video. This is going to be video 8 in the series, and I just want to give you kind of a quick introduction and talk about what's going to be going on for the rest of the series. So as some of you have noticed, these videos have been coming out pretty inconsistently if you're watching them kind of live as I'm posting them. I do apologize about that, but I'm trying my best to make sure these are all quality videos. I don't want to rush them, and I'm pretty busy right now, so they are going to be coming out kind of randomly. I do apologize about that, but I promise the series will continue. I will finish it. It just might take a little longer than I originally expected. Now, something else to mention, a lot of you are still commenting about the fact that I'm using class-based components. If you want to know why I'm doing that, go back and watch video 4. I had kind of a 2 or 3 minute little intro where I discussed why we ended up doing that. To give you a basic summary, essentially, I did not realize the functional components were just superior and better to be used in 2020. When I had worked for Microsoft, I was using class-based components, so I kind of just went with what I knew. Anyways, that being said, we will do a video at the end of the series going over functional components, so don't worry, I will show you how those work, and if you really wanted to translate this app to functional components, you totally can, but the point of this series is not to do, industry standards and best practices. It's just to learn how we can build a React app with Django, and then of course, you guys can go and modify this all you want. I anticipate that you're going to be playing with the code as we go anyways. All right, so with that said, let's get started. The first thing I want to do in this video is actually center all of my stuff in the middle of the screen. So you may have noticed that this create a room is kind of, sitting in a really odd position. And obviously that's not what we want. So I want to make sure this is centered both vertically and horizontally. Now, there is a way to do this using just Material UI components, but I think it's a lot easier to just hard code some CSS. So that's actually what we're going to do. I'm going to go inside of my CSS file here. So static CSS index.css, and I'm just going to start by removing this display flex from app. Now, to be perfectly honest with you guys, I'm not a CSS master. In fact, I'm not really a front-end master in general. I work a lot more on the back end, but I just know that that line is going to mess with what I'm trying to do. So you just have to remove that display flex, which is right here, from the app div. Now, I know I mentioned in the previous video that you needed that. You can ignore that. We don't need that. In fact, it's going to mess up our entire program or our entire front end if you have that there. So anyways, just remove that. And now what we're going to do is make a new class inside of here that we're going to use for a div that will pretty much just center all of our content. So I'm going to call this class center. Makes sense. We'll say dot center, and then inside of here we're going to say position. It's actually not going to be fixed, it's going to be absolute, and then I'm going to define that we're going to start at 50% top and 50% left, and what this will do ideally is push all of our content into the center of the screen. So we're going to say top and then 50%, and then we're going to say left, and this is going to say 50% like that. And then we're going to actually add this thing called transform. And inside of here, we're going to use the translate function, and we're going to say negative 50%. And then we're going to repeat that and say negative 50% again. Now, I'm not really going to explain why this does work. You can look up the translate function and the transform keyword if you want, and you'll find probably a better explanation that I can give you on something like Stack Overflow. But pretty much this will center all of our content in the middle of whatever it's contained in. So it's not necessarily going to center it in the middle of the screen. If we applied this on something that was wrapped in a div, then it would center it inside of that div. So that's an important distinction with what I did here. Anyways, what we need to do now is actually use this, right, and make sure all of our content is being centered. So I'm going to go over to my app.js and notice that inside of my app.js, I'm rendering a div, and then the div is rendering the home page. So inside of div, what I'm going to do is simply give this a class name. I'm going to say class name equals, you guessed it, we're going to use center. So now that will use the class we just defined instead of index.css. And if we go ahead and have a look at our page and we refresh, you can see that our content is nice and center in the middle of the screen. Now notice that since this is an app.js, this is going to center literally everything for our website. So if we didn't want that, and say there was some pages that were fancy and for some reason, we didn't want them to be centered, then we would just have to move this div further into whatever component we actually wanted to be centered. So if I went to say homepage, maybe I would wrap the router instead of wrapping this, this homepage right here. That might make more sense. But for our application, it's totally fine. We just want everything to be centered. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now, to show you that this isn't just going to work on the create room page, let's just go to the home page like that. And you can see our homepage text is centered as well. All right, so now that we have that figured out and our app is looking a little bit nicer, let's actually start coding out the join room page. So we're going to use a very similar theme to what I did here, but of course it's just going to be a little bit simpler because we don't have as many things that we need to implement. So let's go to our join room page or room join page, and let's start using some Material UI components here and making this look a lot nicer. And then of course we'll implement the functionality so we can call the backend API. We can actually join the room and be brought to that correct page. So before we move any further, I just need to quickly thank the sponsor of this video and this series, which is AlgoExpert. Now, as you already know, AlgoExpert is the best platform to use to prepare for your coding interviews at large tech companies. Now, fun fact, I actually work at AlgoExpert, and my first 5 coding interview questions are live on the platform right now. I've been working there for a few months, and what I'm doing is actually teaching and coming up with brand new coding interview questions. I can promise you they are the best, and you guys will definitely enjoy them. Make sure to check out AlgoExpert from the link in the description and use the code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is import a bunch of components. Now, some of you guys were yelling at me before, and rightfully so, because I actually, if we have a look at, say, like create room page, I imported everything from the specific like module. So I went, form control label, and then from Material UI /core / form control label. I really don't need to do that. I don't know why I did, but we can import everything just from Material UI /core. It's not necessary to define this extra thing, which means we can import all of the stuff I did here in one line. So I'll show you how we actually do that. But let's go to our room join page and let's say import. We're going to put our brackets here and we'll start importing everything we need. So the first thing we're going to have is text field. Then we're going to have a button. Then we're going to have a grid. Then we're going to have typography. And that's actually all we need for this. And we're going to say from, and that's going to be at Material UI /core. So this import will work. We don't need to specify from, Material UI /core /grid. This is totally fine. Now we also need something from React Router DOM. So I'm going to say import, probably guess what this one is at this point, but we're going to import link. And then that's going to be from React Router -DOM like that. All right, so now that we have our imports, let's actually start by just creating kind of the UI for this page, and then we'll work on actually handling all the button presses and all of that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is what we've kind of done in some other pages. So I'm going to say return, and then I'm going to define a grid. This grid is going to be a container, and it's going to have spacing equal to 1. We've already gone over what that is, so I'm going to skip the explanation for that. We're going to end the grid, and now we're going to start defining all of the components that we need. So pretty much what I want for this room join page is just a text field that allows the user to type in a room code, and then 2 buttons. 1 button to join that room, and 1 button to go back to whatever page they came from, or we can hard code it and specify that we want them to go back to the home page. Now, other than that, we'll show like a nice error message if they mess up and type in an invalid code, but that's all we need. It's going to be pretty straightforward. So we have our first grid. I'm actually going to define another grid now. I'm going to say grid. This one's going to be an item because it's inside of the container. We're going to say XS is equal to, and we're going to define 12. This is just to fill the width of the screen. And then in the previous page, I was aligning all of the items by doing something like align equals center. Now that's fine, we can do that, but I'm pretty sure I can also go up here and say align items like that and make this equal to center. And if we've done this correctly, and we might not have, we'll see once we render the page, this should actually automatically align all of the grid items for us. So again, we'll see if that works. We might have to modify some things, but I'm going to skip doing align center for every single item here in the hope that this will actually align them for us. All right, so now we have grid, and we're going to say item, and then XS equals 12. We'll end that grid. And inside of the first item here, what I want to do is just add the header like we've done previously that says join a room. So we'll go ahead and we'll say typography. It's not going to be component. We'll just say typography. We'll say variant, and that's going to be equal to H4. And actually, I should have left the component here because we are going to use component, and that's going to be equal to H4 as well. We'll end the typography tag, and then inside of here, we'll simply say join a room. Now I'll actually do a lowercase a, and that will be good for our first grid item. So now let's make another grid item. Let's actually just copy this tag here. So inside of here, we're just going to define a text field. So we'll say text field like that. We won't use a proper closing tag, so actually remove that. We'll just do a slash at the end here. And then inside of here, we need to define a few different things. So first, we're going to say error. For right now, I'm just going to set the error equal to error, but we will change that later to be dynamic, so it changes based on what the actual error message was. Next, we're going to define a label. So we're going to say label equals, and this is going to be code. Pretty much, this is the label for the text field, right? And then we will say placeholder. This will be what is there before we start typing. And this we can say is equal to enter a room code like that. Next, we need a value. The value will be equal to 2 squiggly brackets right now. We will change that in a second. We're going to be dealing with the state like we did in the previous one to kind of set these values. We'll say values equal to that. We'll say the helper text is equal to, and then this will be equal to something else that again we'll define in a minute. We're going to say the variant of this text field is going to be outlined. This is just a specific style for this text field. Again, you can look these up in the Material UI documentation if you want to see how to make a different looking one. And for now, I think that's all we need inside of here. Now, before I go too much further, let's actually fill in these empty ones and let's work a little bit on the state for this component. So inside of my constructor, I'm going to say this dot state, and this is going to be equal to 2 things. First of all, it's going to be equal to the room code. This is what will be inside of the text field, right? Whatever they're typing in. And then it will also be equal to error, and this will be an empty string. So what we're going to do here is pretty much store what the current room code is. So whatever they have typed into the field as the tentative room code that they might press enter for. And then we will have the error message. So if they press enter, we can store the error message in the state, and then we can show that in, in this text field. So whenever an error pops up, it will re-render the component and we'll show it. Anyways, so now that we have that, let's go to value, and let's change this value to be equal to this dot state dot room code. And then for the helper text, this is going to be equal to this dot state dot and then error like that. And we're also going to say where error is here, where I had the placeholder text of error, we're going to make this equal to this dot state dot error as well. And you'll see why we need both of them in a second. But yeah, that's pretty much all we need for right now. Okay, so now that we have that, let's actually just give it a look. So let's go to not the create page, but the join page. And you can see that we're getting join a room. It's in the middle of the screen. We have this little box, and when I press on it, you see it goes blue. All right, so that's looking good. And now let's continue. So actually on second thought here, I'm having a look at this and I'm realizing that it's not really in the middle of the screen. Like have a look at this, it's kind of shifted to the left. And I'm realizing that the issue for that is that we have this align items that I was kind of hoping was going to work for all of the items inside of these grids, but it turns out it's not. Now, I think the reason it's not working is because it will align these grids, but the items inside of these grids aren't going to be aligned. So hopefully that makes sense, but pretty much what we need to do is just do what we had before. We're going to go into all of these grids and we're just going to say align center. Kind of annoying that we have to do that, but I guess we do. Although I'm sure maybe one of you guys knows a way that we can avoid doing that. Anyways, we'll put align center. Let's just have a quick look here and see if this looks any better. And there we go. Now we're in the middle of the screen. Awesome. So now just notice, I think I showed this, but when you press this, code kind of goes up there. You get the placeholder text and it looks all nice. All right, now actually just to show you what the error looks like, let's add some text into the error as the default state. Let's refresh, and now notice that this actually goes red because we have some error. It shows us the error right here. That would be like the helper text. And yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like when you have an error. All right, so now we can remove the error and let's continue coding this out. I guess all we really need right now actually is the 2 different buttons. So now let's make 2 more grid items. So we'll copy that. And while we're at it, let's just copy it one more time. Now inside of here, we'll add our first button. So the first button I want, we can define with button like that. We can say that the variant for this one is going to be equal to contained. I think we used this previously. We'll say the color is going to be equal to primary. And then what else do we need? We will say 2 is equal to, and then where do we want to go? Well, we want to go back to slash, which is going to be our home page. And then the component for this button is going to be equal to not this dot state, but link. So we've done this previously, but what this means is when we press this button, it will act like a link using that React router that we imported from above. And it will redirect us to the slash or the home page. Now here, I'm just gonna make this, oops, I realized that I'm coding out the wrong button first, but anyways, we can just make this one the back button, that's fine. So let's just take this now and move this below the other grid item. Okay, because I coded out the wrong one first. But anyways, we can copy this button and we can just modify it slightly so that now it will actually work with the other text that we want, which is going to be enter room. Okay, so now we have a button for enter room. Obviously, we don't want to redirect to slash. And in fact, for this one, we don't want to redirect to anything because we don't know if the room they've entered is valid or not yet. And we actually don't know what the room code is, right? So here we'll just have to have an on press or an on click. So we'll say on click is equal to, and then we'll fill in some function here that we'll use to kind of handle the on press for the enter room. All right, so are we getting an error? Yeah, we are. Okay, let's just say on click is equal to that. And let's just do a quick refresh. And now we get enter room and back. I realized I did not change the color to what it needs to be, the same color. So let's go to the back button and let's change the primary color to be secondary. All right, so give it a quick refresh and let's see. There we go. We have enter room and then we have back. Just to make sure I'm not going crazy, let's have a look at the create page and see if we use the same color scheme. Yes, we did. So we are all good. All right, so that seems to be working. Now that we have that, we need to code out kind of the logic for this, this component, right? So the first thing that we need to do is actually handle when we change this text field. So pretty much, how do we actually capture what the current room code is? We did this previously, but it's pretty straightforward. We just need to make a method. So we're gonna say this method is equal to handle text field change. I'm prefacing it with an underscore, but you don't need to do that. It's just kind of to denote this is a private method. We're going to take inside of here E, and then we'll say this dot set state. And in here, we will simply say that the room code is equal to E dot target dot value like we've done previously. All right, so now that we have that, we need to bind this method and then set it inside of text field on the on change event like we have done. So let's go to the constructor and let's say this dot, and then we need to remember the name, handle text field change is equal to this dot underscore handle text field change, and then dot bind, and we bind it to this. Now, some of you have noted that we can use ES6 arrow functions instead of doing this. If you're not familiar with what that is, don't worry, but that is another method that we can go with. We can pretty much go here to where on change was, and rather than setting it equal to some method like this, we can just make it equal to an arrow function, then we can do whatever we want inside of here. That's fine. I'm just not going to do that. I just wanted to show you how the bind works in case some people were confused or they haven't used arrow functions before. But anyways, on the on change event, we'll just make this equal to this dot underscore handle text field change. And that should be all we need to do to actually get this state updating and having everything working properly. All right, so now that we have that, we need to handle the event in which we press the enter room button. So that involves making another method. So let's go make another method here, and let's just call this one underscore room button pressed like that. Inside of here, we don't need to take anything. And this is where we're going to actually send a post request to the backend to pretty much say, hey, we're trying to join this room. Does this room exist? And if it does, can we successfully join it? So this will involve us working a little bit on the back end, which we'll do in a second. But first, before we fill in this method, let's just bind it and then let's set it up properly as the on-click event for this button. So let's go up here. We'll do the same thing we did before. We'll say this dot underscore room button pressed equals this dot underscore room button pressed dot bind to this. Now I'm just realizing that in my other files, I just went and took a quick look at them. I didn't use the underscore. So just for consistency here, let's actually remove the underscores just so that I don't go crazy seeing that in some files we used underscores and in others we didn't. The reason I would have used an underscore is just because that's kind of a way to denote in regular JavaScript that this is a private method. In other words, we're not going to use this method from a different component, but that's fine. We don't really need to worry about that for the purpose of this tutorial. Anyways, now that we have that and we've binded this method, let's go to the button and let's say onClick is equal to, and this dot, and then I guess this is going to be, what did we call it? Something button pressed or room button pressed. Okay, room button pressed. All right, so now that we have that, we can just go inside of room button pressed and just do a quick test. Let's say console.log this dot state dot room code. All right, so let's run this, give it a quick refresh. Let's go to /join. We can see we get our nice little UI popping up here. We press enter room, inspect. Let's go to the console. We can see nothing showed up. If we type hello, enter room, we get hello. ABC, enter, we get ABC. So this is indeed working. And now we are good to move on and actually start working on the back end and then hooking this up with the back end. All right, so I'm inside of my views.py file, which is inside of the API folder. And the first thing we need to do here is make a new view that's going to allow us to join a new room. So pretty much the problem we're trying to solve here is a user wants to join a room. How do they do that? Well, they need to send us the room code. Then we need to make sure that code is indeed valid. And if it is, we can let the user join the room. And is there anything in the backend that we need to do to handle that? There actually is something that we need to do to pretty much let us know that, hey, this user is in this room, but we'll talk about that in a second. So let's go ahead and say class, and I guess we can just call this one join room or room join or whatever you want to call it. It's going to inherit again from API view. We're actually going to use a post request here rather than using a get request because we just want them to post the fact that they're joining the room. A get request doesn't really make sense for this context. So let's say define, we're going to say post. Inside of here, we're going to say self. We're going to take the request and then the format is equal to optionally none. Now inside of here, the first thing we're going to do is actually the same thing that we did inside of this create room view. We're going to make sure that the user currently has an active session. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to check if they do have an active session, and if they don't, we're going to go ahead and actually create one for them because we will be using this session inside of here. Again, you'll see why in just a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually get the code from the post request. So I want the user to send a code. We'll define what kind of word, or I guess, yeah, what argument we want them to send the code as, but I think we've just been using code, so I guess we'll just stick with that. So we'll say code equals, and then this is going to be request dot, not get, but dot data, because we're using a post request, not a get request. Remember, with post requests, we can use simply the dot data field. So request dot data dot get, and then inside of here, we want to get the code, but I don't really want to just hard code it in here in case I want to change it later. So what I'll do is I'll go up here. I'll just make a class variable, and I guess we can use the same one, even though this isn't really the same thing. We'll just put it here. We'll say lookup URL kwarg, and then that way, you know, it kind of intuitively makes sense. We can just say this dot lookup URL kwarg, and this I'm coding in JavaScript. This should be self. All right, so now we have code equals request dot data dot get. We're gonna first make sure that we do actually have a code, right? So we'll say if code does not equal none, remembering that this dot get function here will return none if there actually was no code argument or no code data or key or whatever you want to call it in the data. So if code does not equal none, then we want to say room is equal to, this is going to be room dot objects dot filter, and then inside of here we'll say code is equal to code like that. And that should actually be good to find the room that we're looking for. So we'll of course have to make sure that we do actually have some results here. So we'll start by saying room result equals, and this really, we can do it in snake case. So we'll say room underscore result equals this. And then we'll say if room result, or I guess if the len of room result is greater than 0, then room is equal to, and that's going to be room underscore result at index 0. So now that we actually have a room inside of here, what I'm going to do is return a response. So I'm going to say return response, and then we're just going to have a message. So let's go and make this message. And this is just going to simply be equal to room like that, joined, and if I could spell correctly, and we'll just do an exclamation point. It doesn't really matter what we send back here, but we're just trying to tell them, hey, this was successful. So we'll use the status code, which is status dot http underscore 200 underscore OK to tell them, hey, this was indeed successful. Now, before I actually go ahead and return the response, what I want to do is make a note on the back end that this user is in this room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say self.request.session. I'm going to make a new variable here, a new key or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to say room code, and that's equal to code. This is pretty much just to tell us that, hey, this user in its current session is in this room. So later on, we're not going to do it in this video. We'll check if a user is currently in a room. And if they are, say they, return to the website, like they close their Safari app or they close their mobile phone app, whatever, and then they come back to it later on, we'll know that they were originally in this room and we can return them to that room without them having to type the code in again. So that's why I'm adding this room code thing here to the session so we know which user is in which room. And And then we'll add some functionality in the room, I guess, component or room page later on that will let the user leave the room so that they can join another one if they wanted to. And just to quickly clarify the syntax here, essentially what we're able to do with sessions is store information relevant to each individual user or to each individual session. So by me saying self.request.session and then typing in that code, room code, what I'm really doing is creating kind of a temporary storage object that's called room code and is being equal to whatever the value of code is, right? So the variable code. Now this will just be stored in this user session, just like this user has a session key, right, which we've looked at previously. So this is a way that you can kind of store your own information in the user session. I'll show us later how we can actually get the information from the user session, how we can delete the information and all of that, but it's nothing super complicated. Whenever you want to store information, self.request.session, whatever you want to call it, and then the information you want to store. But anyways, that's what we need for right now. Now, underneath both these if statements here, I'm actually just going to, actually, no, I can do it here, I think. I'm going to return another response, and I'm pretty much going to tell them, hey, this was a bad response. So we'll say return response. We'll actually go and we'll say bad request as the, I guess, key here. So bad request, and then we can say invalid post data, did not find a, I guess we can put it in quotes, or we can just say code key like that. Okay. For the status, we'll say status is equal to status.http underscore 400 underscore bad request. I don't know why it's saying 400. Okay, that's interesting, but underscore 400 underscore bad request. So actually, sorry, that's what happens if they don't send us a room code, but we do need to do something if they don't have any rooms for the specific code, right? So pretty much if the code they sent us was invalid. So I'm going to copy this response, and actually, in fact, I can copy this whole line. And right here, I'm going to return response, but instead of having message here, I'm going to say bad request again. And if my caps locks could turn off, okay. So we'll say bad request. And then here we can simply say invalid room code, and we can change the status code here to be HTTP underscore 400 underscore bad request. All right, so I'm just trying to send some different messages just so that they know whether they had an invalid room code or whether they actually just messed up the request entirely and didn't send us the right data. So now that we have that, the room join API view is actually done. We just need to set up the URL endpoint, sorry. And now let's go to the create room view. I just want to quickly add something that I realized I forgot. So notice here we have self.request.session room code is equal to code. So I want to add that inside of here. So when we create a room, this user also gets noted as, hey, they're the host of this room. They're in this room. Let's store that fact in the session. So I'm going to say self.request.session room code. We're going to go down here and let's actually just see where it makes sense to do this in actually both this if and this else statement, because these room codes would potentially be different. Like here we created a new room, here we had an existing room. So what I'm going to do is actually say self.request.session room code is equal to and then room.code. Again, my caps lock is just going crazy. So we'll say room.code and then we'll do the exact same thing, except we'll do it here. Again, the reason we're doing that is just because of the way that we kind of returned these responses. We need to do it in both of them. All right, so now that we have that, let's actually set up the URL endpoint for join room, and then we'll hook that up in the front end, and then we should be done for this tutorial. So let's go to URLs. Instead of create room or get room, now we're going to need a join room. So let's add the join room here. Let's add a path. Let's go here and say join-room. And then we will say join room.as_view. All right, so perfect. We have that now. Let's go back to our front end and then let's actually send a post request to this backend and see if this does indeed work. So we need to go to our components. We need to go to the create room, no, not create room, join room page. And now we're just going to fill in this room button press and send that request and then have it redirect us to the correct page if this request is valid. So we've done this before, but let's do it again. Let's say const request options. This is where we're going to define the information related to the post request. We're going to say the method is equal to post. We're going to say that the headers are equal to content type. We're going to define that this is going to be application/JSON like that with no capitals. Then we're going to create the body, which really is just going to be the data that we're going to send. We're going to say this is equal to JSON.stringify. And then inside of here, we will have code, and that will be equal to this.state.room code like that. Okay, so that's all we need for the request options. We can add our semicolon there. And now what we'll do is actually send this request. So we'll send a fetch request. We need to send this to the right endpoint. So we're going to say /API/join-room, and then we can end slash. We're going to pass the request options, and then we will define our .then and our .catch. So we're going to say .then, we're going to take a response. And then here we're going to say, open brackets like that. We'll say if response.ok. And if response is okay, then what that means is we successfully joined the room. So if we did successfully join the room, then what we need to do is actually redirect ourselves to that room. So what I can do is, since that meant that the code that we passed in was valid, if we did actually get an okay response, we can simply redirect the user to /room/ whatever code it is that they had in that input field. So we don't need to get it from the server. We can simply get it from the front end because we know that that code is indeed valid. So we're going to say this.props.history.push. And again, this is just what we can use in code to actually redirect. I'm going to define 2 backticks here. This is just so I can do a string formatting. And then I'm going to do the $. And inside of here, I'm going to define this.state.room code. So this again will just redirect us to room/ and then $ this.state.room code. If you're looking for the backtick symbol, it's right below the escape key. I think, do you need to hold shift to get to it? No, you don't. You can just press it once. Shift is the tilde. All right. Now that we have that, let's make it the else. So obviously if the response is not okay, it must be not okay. I mean, that was pretty straightforward. We say this.setState. And what we'll do here is simply set the error message to be whatever the error message was that we got, or we can just make it our own custom error message. In fact, that might be easier. Let's say error, and we'll just say room not found like that. And then lastly, I guess from here, we could return something if we want. We don't really need to return anything, but we can just say .catch like that. Here we can catch the error, and then we can simply just console.log this error in case we want to see what this is. So console.log, and then the error message. Now, this catch will only happen if for some reason sending this request does actually throw an error for us. And then if it does, we'll just print that out to the screen. But otherwise, we'll do this .then. We'll make sure that the response is okay. If the response is okay, we'll redirect the user to this room code. If it's not, then we'll simply set the error message to be room not found, and we'll see that error message on the UI. Now, in the case where this room is not found, we may actually want to clear the input field. Now, we don't need to do that. In fact, I'm probably not going to do that, but that is something that we could do and that you might consider. That's kind of a UI thing. I mean, I don't really know what we would consider to be best, clearing the input field or not. But anyways, let's give this a refresh and let's try this out. So first, we actually, we need some room. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's go to create. Let's just create it like that. This is going to be our code. So let's just copy that. We can go back now. Oops. Come on, I don't want to go to room. Sorry, let's go back to the home page. Then we can go back to /join. Now let's type in this code. Let's enter room, and room not found. Okay, so we're getting a 404. Apparently join room is not found. Let's see why that's happening. Okay, so it looks like I made another silly mistake here. Add an extra slash to the end of join room. That was causing me to pretty much that was causing the server to not recognize the request I was sending. So just remove this slash at the end of line 67. Again, all this code will be on the GitHub, so you can find it if for some reason I'm confusing you, but I had a slash here, just need to remove that. So anyways, now that we have that, let's go back here. Let's try to join the room. You can see now we got the error, post bad request. Let's go enter room, and notice we enter the room, we get redirected there, and all is good. If we go back and I try to enter, say like that, press enter room, we get the error message, room not found. And I guess this was coming up earlier, but you can see that we are getting that error message showing up. So this is all good. Now we have a way to actually join the rooms. And on the server side, we are storing this information in the user session. So later on, we don't have to say, keep joining this room every time we leave the room page. It will just automatically redirect us to the room that we are currently in. So with that said, I'm going to end the tutorial here. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in another YouTube video.